I was standing in my own kitchen, my safe place, my island of stillness, when my father slid an envelope across the table as if he were serving a court summons. His tone was cool, businesslike, almost rehearsed. "This is the amount you owe us," he said. "For raising you, supporting you, and everything your mother and I sacrificed. 25,000 will cover it." I thought it was a joke. My parents had always been a little dramatic, but never theatrical. But he didn't smirk, didn't soften, didn't blink. I opened the envelope. A typed invoice. Itemized. Childhood groceries. Private school tuition. Medical bills from when I was 8. And at the bottom, in bold, "Due immediately. $25,000. Payment expected from your alimony settlement." I stared at him, searching for humor, warmth, sanity, something. But he just tapped his finger on the counter. "As your parents, we invested in you," he said. "Now we need a return. You finally have money. It's time to pay us back." My chest tightened. I wasn't wealthy, not even close. The alimony was barely enough to stabilize my life after a 32-year marriage collapsed under the weight of my ex-husband's betrayals. That settlement was supposed to give me space to breathe, recover, and rebuild. I whispered, "Dad, that money is for me to live on." He shrugged. "We supported you for decades. You owe us." And then, because cruelty rarely comes alone, my mother stepped into the room and stood next to him. Silent. Arms folded. A wall of agreement. "You always cost us so much," she murmured. "It's only fair." The room spun. Everything warm inside me collapsed like wet cardboard. I was 59 years old, divorced, bruised but standing, and suddenly confronted with the idea that the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had turned parenthood into a bill. But the real shock, the moment that haunts me still, was what my father said next. "If you refuse, we will take legal action. You know your sister's husband is a lawyer." I felt every piece of my past, childhood memories, teenage struggles, adult sacrifices, rearrange themselves into a shape I didn't recognize. My own family, sharpening knives behind closed doors. I sat down slowly, gripping the edges of the chair. And then, calmly, I said the one sentence I probably should have said years earlier. "Show me everything. Every document. Every item. Every justification." Because something wasn't right. And I was done being blindsided. I just didn't know yet that this demand, this bizarre, cruel invoice, was only the beginning. And what I would uncover next would tear open decades of buried truth. The first document I examine reveals a date that makes everything impossible. My name is Elaine Harrington, and I am 59 years old. I speak with the kind of calm you earn only after surviving enough storms to stop fearing rain. For most of my life, I believed I was steady, sensible, predictable, a woman who built a quiet life and stayed loyal even when loyalty cut me. I had been married to my ex-husband, Robert, for 32 years. A long marriage, though not a warm one. I raised our children, kept our home, supported his career, smoothed over his temper, and spent too many nights pretending that silence was normal. When the marriage ended, when his affair with a younger colleague became impossible to deny, I walked away with little more than the alimony. Not wealth. Not assets. Just enough to create a fragile beginning. My divorce attorney told me, "Think of this as oxygen. Not luxury, oxygen." And that was accurate. The settlement allowed me to move into a modest townhouse, buy reliable groceries, and start physical therapy for the chronic back pain I developed during the stressed final years of marriage. Nothing extravagant. Nothing cushioned. Just basic survival. So when my parents demanded $25,000, something inside me cracked. Not from anger, but from disbelief so pure it left me hollow. I had always been the good daughter. I visited them weekly. I handled their paperwork. I took them to doctor appointments. I fixed their smartphones, cooked freezer meals, repaired leaky faucets, and sent reminders about medication schedules. And more than anything, I forgave their sharp tongues. My parents were not tender people. They prized discipline, achievement, and appearances. Love existed, yes, but it came dressed in conditions, unspoken but unmistakable. Still, I never imagined they would put a price tag on me. Yet there I was, handling a typed invoice from my own father. And as I examined it, my breath grew shallow. Because something about the dates and numbers didn't add up. One particular line item, private school tuition, 1978, caught my eye. I didn't attend private school in 1978. I didn't attend school at all in 1978. I wasn't born until 1979. I felt a strange stillness move through me. A cold understanding. They hadn't compiled this invoice from memory. They had gathered documents and misused them. Someone had manufactured these numbers. Someone had prepared for this moment long before my marriage collapsed. And someone, my parents, or perhaps my sister's husband, the lawyer, was orchestrating something larger than a simple demand. I looked up at my father and asked, "Who prepared this?" His answer was hesitant. Too hesitant. "It doesn't matter who," he said. "What matters is you owe it." But it did matter. It mattered because this wasn't parental frustration or misguided entitlement. This was a plan. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I saw it clearly. My parents believed I was no longer a daughter. I was an asset. A resource. A well they intended to drain. What none of them anticipated was that their little invoice, their attempt to exploit my vulnerability, was about to unlock a truth I had been blind to for decades. A truth that would change everything about my past, my future, and the family I thought I understood. I discover my signature, apparently, for a document I never signed, dated years before I could even write my own name. Growing up in my family was like living inside a well-kept museum, beautiful to look at, but too fragile to touch. My parents valued order above warmth, achievement above curiosity, and obedience above expression. Everything had a place. Everything had a rule. And children were expected to be grateful. My father, Thomas, had a voice that could silence a room without rising above a whisper. My mother, Ruth, perfected disappointment the way others perfected hospitality. She didn't yell, she sighed. A long, heavy breath that made you feel like you'd failed the world. As a child, I learned early that affection was something you earned by performing correctly, not something given freely. My younger sister, Julie, adapted better. She learned to agree, to flatter, to mold herself into whatever shape pleased them. She was always the golden child. The smart one. The savior. The one they invested in, willingly. I was the worker. The fixer. The dependable one. And because I filled that role, they never saw me as someone with my own life, my own needs, or my own boundaries. I was simply the person who made problems disappear. I see that clearly now, but at the time, it just felt normal. So when I left for college, they acted as though I'd abandoned them. When I married young, they criticized the choice. When my marriage turned out to be difficult, they sighed into the phone and reminded me that life isn't supposed to be easy. And when my marriage ended, they did not offer comfort. They offered calculations. During weekly dinners, I often listened to them praise Julie's lifestyle, her large home, her successful husband, her vacations. They compared us without ever stating the comparison. They suggested she was returning the blessings, while I was merely getting by. But even with all of that emotional distance, I never imagined financial exploitation. I never imagined they would put a price on raising me. Until the day I found my forged signature. I was sitting in their living room, invoice spread out, my reading glasses perched on the edge of my nose. My father hovered near the doorway as if afraid I'd discover too much. And then I saw it. A reimbursement request. Dated 1982. Signed by me. The problem. In 1982, I was 3 years old. I could barely draw a circle. I held up the paper. "Dad, this is forgery." He stiffened. It's not important. The numbers are accurate. My mother appeared in the doorway. You're always so dramatic, Elaine. Always trying to find problems where there are none. But this wasn't drama. This was deception. And for the first time in my life, I did not shrink. I did not apologize. I did not smooth the discomfort. I said very quietly, I want to see every document you have about me. Every file. Every record. Now. My mother's face tightened. My father muttered, Julie said this might happen. Julie said? Why would Julie anticipate this? And why was my sister involved in any of this at all? It hit me then, an ache under my ribs, a recognition too sharp to ignore. This wasn't just my parents' idea. Someone else had orchestrated it. Someone who knew about my settlement. Someone who knew my emotional state. Someone who believed I would break easily. My own sister. When I confront Julie, she says a sentence that chills me to my bones. You weren't supposed to look at the dates. When I confronted Julie, she didn't deny it. In fact, she didn't even seem embarrassed. She met me in her immaculate kitchen, all marble and chrome, sipping tea like we were discussing a neighbor's lawn rather than my parents' attempt to extort me. You always take things so personally, she said. Mom and Dad just need help. You finally have money. It's simple. It's not simple, I replied. And it's not legal. She rolled her eyes. Everything is legal if you document the need. My husband looked through their records. He said their expenses raising us were enormous. You were always sick, always needing something. That doesn't give them the right to demand repayment. Why not? She asked, as casually as asking about the weather. Parents make sacrifices. Children return them. No, I said, my voice dangerously even. Parents support their children out of love. Not because they expect profit. Julie's smile was thin. Not everyone sees it that way. I set the forged document on the table. This has my signature. From when I was a toddler. She didn't even flinch. Dad remembered you scribbling something. That counts. I stared at her, stunned by the ease with which she justified lying. Then she leaned in, lowering her voice. Look, Elaine. You've never carried your weight in this family. You chose a small life. A mediocre marriage. You never earned what Julie earned. She stopped, catching herself. But it was too late. She had said, you never earned what Julie earned. Third person. As if she were talking about someone else. As if she had stepped into the role her husband always played. Judge, evaluator, accountant. My sister had become a version of my parents. More polished, but just as transactional. And then she delivered the sentence that chilled me. You weren't supposed to look at the dates. You were just supposed to pay it. There it was. The truth. They believed I was weak enough, emotionally cracked enough after my divorce, to hand over $25,000 without question. They underestimated me. My voice was steady, but my spine felt made of steel. No one, I said, gets to fabricate debt and call it love. But Julie wasn't finished. We've already talked to Dad's accountant, she said. If you refuse to pay, we'll pursue legal reimbursement. It'll become a family issue. Public. She didn't realize that every threat she issued clarified everything for me. They wanted my alimony. They believed they deserved it. They expected obedience. And they thought I would crumble. But I had survived a marriage that tried to erase me. I had survived loneliness, betrayal, and the slow erosion of self. I was not going to be erased again. As I left her house, a single thought crystallized. If they want to play this as a legal matter, then a legal matter is exactly what I'll give them. But the path I was about to walk would reveal something far more disturbing than financial manipulation. A truth buried in my parents' files, something I would discover only because I demanded every piece of documentation. Something that would change my identity. My lawyer tells me, Elaine, Your parents claimed you as a dependent for years after you moved out. That's tax fraud. And that's only the beginning. My lawyer, Marissa, was a quiet woman with sharp eyes and a sharper instinct for truth. She sat across from me at her polished wooden desk, flipping through the folder I'd carried out of my parents' house. The forged signature was only the first red flag. She slid another document toward me. Your parents claim they supported you financially until you were 29. That's impossible, I said. I moved out at 21. Got my first job the same year. She pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose. They claimed you as a dependent for 8 years after that. I felt my stomach twist. Why? Because dependent deductions reduced their tax burden. And based on the numbers, they received several $1,000s in tax refunds specifically because of you. I stared at the paper. So they owe the government money, not the other way around. Precisely, she said. And here's the part you won't like. If they try to sue you for this fabricated debt, they open themselves up to an IRS audit. And if that happens, the forged documents become evidence of deliberate fraud. Not just clerical mistakes, intent. I swallowed hard. My parents, prideful as they were, would never survive the public humiliation of an audit. But I knew this wasn't the time for revenge. Not yet. Not until I understood the full scope of what they'd done. Marissa kept reading. There were medical expenses listed as paid by my parents long after I started paying my own bills. Reimbursements for private tutoring I never received. Travel expenses for family trips I never attended. And worst of all, items labeled support payments during years I lived 3 states away. Every document told the same story. They had been misusing my name, my identity, as a financial asset for decades. And the $25,000 demand was not spontaneous. It was the culmination of a long pattern. Marissa sat back. There's enough here to file a protective petition. If they escalate this legally, they'll face charges. I rubbed my forehead. I don't want to ruin them. But you do want to protect yourself, she said gently. I nodded. She leaned forward. There's more. Your sister's husband wasn't just advising your parents. He drafted some of these documents. My pulse stilled. He forged my signature? We can't prove that yet, she said. But the handwriting matches his. And the timestamps on the digital files suggest they were created last month. Last month. Before the divorce was finalized. Before my alimony became public record. They had been preparing for this. I sat back, breath slow, hands cold. I thought of my parents at the kitchen table, discussing numbers. I thought of my sister nodding along. I thought of my brother-in-law printing documents late at night, believing I would never question them. And then Marissa placed one final paper in front of me. Elaine, this is your birth certificate. But look at the amendment. An amendment dated the year I turned 12. My eyes moved over the text, and the world quieted around me. Your biological father, she said softly, is not the man who raised you. The room tilted. My breath caught. And the invoice, this cruel, calculated demand, suddenly made a horrifying new kind of sense. My parents didn't see me as a daughter. I wasn't theirs to love. But I was useful for money. I confront my mother, and she says, "We did what we had to do. And you will not expose us." When I returned to my parents' home, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't emotional. I carried the calm of someone who finally saw the full map instead of wandering through fog. My mother sat on the couch, watching a muted news broadcast. My father hovered nearby, as if expecting confrontation. I placed the amended birth certificate on the coffee table. My mother's face drained of color. "You weren't supposed to see that," she whispered. "You weren't supposed to use me as a tax shelter," I replied. Her lips tightened. "We did what we had to do." I looked at my father. "You demanded repayment for raising me." He crossed his arms. "We spent a fortune on you. You spent money on your own lifestyle, I said. And you used my name to reduce your taxes. He flinched, not from guilt, but from being exposed. My mother leaned forward. Elaine, listen to me. People make mistakes. But family protects each other. You will not expose us. I felt a wave of clarity, sharp and cleansing. No, I said. I'm going to protect myself. They both stiffened. I continued, my voice steady. I have a lawyer. I have copies of every document. If you attempt any legal action against me, you will trigger an audit that exposes your fraud. My father's jaw clenched. You wouldn't. I would. And I will. Unless you withdraw the invoice, stop contacting me for money, and sign a formal statement acknowledging that I owe you nothing, emotionally or financially. My mother's voice trembled. You're threatening us. No, I said. I'm setting boundaries you should have honored decades ago. My father stepped closer, trying to loom. After everything we did for you. Everything you did, I interrupted, was because you wanted to appear like good parents. But love doesn't come with a bill. Silence settled over the room. For the first time, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Not fear of losing me, fear of consequences. My mother looked away. Then she exhaled and said something so revealing it almost made me laugh. If we don't get the money from you, where are we supposed to get it? Ah, there it was. Their debt. Their spending beyond their means. Their desperation disguised as entitlement. They didn't want justice. They wanted my alimony because they were drowning. But drowning people who push others underwater to save themselves do not deserve rescue. I'm done, I said softly. This ends now. I gathered the documents, turned, and walked toward the door. And as my hand touched the knob, my father growled behind me. You are making a mistake, Elaine. I looked back over my shoulder. No, I said. I'm correcting one. The next morning, I receive a text. My sister threatening to destroy my reputation if I don't cooperate. Julie's text came at dawn. You will regret this. I will destroy your reputation. Everyone will know you abandoned your parents when they needed you. I stared at the message for a long moment, then calmly forwarded it to my lawyer. Marissa called within minutes. Good, she said. Let them escalate. Every threat strengthens your case. And escalate they did. Within days, my sister's husband sent a formally worded letter implying that my refusal to compensate parental investment constituted moral negligence. I gave it to Marissa. She smiled, cool and professional. This is better than evidence. This is confession. Then she drafted a response, detailing the forged documents, notifying them that any lawsuit would trigger mandatory discovery, listing potential IRS penalties, and establishing that any further harassment would result in protective orders. We sent the letter. And then the silence began. My parents stopped calling. My sister didn't text. My brother-in-law suddenly became very quiet. 2 weeks later, Marissa received confirmation from their accountant. Yes, the same one who had once advised them that they had abruptly withdrawn their claim. Not only that, they destroyed the invoice. They deleted the digital files. They backed out of everything. But what they didn't realize was that I had copies. Stored. Safely. Permanently. Their downfall did not come with dramatic courtroom scenes or public spectacle. It came quietly. A tightening of consequences. A shrinking of options. A slow, uncomfortable awareness that they had pushed too far, underestimated the wrong daughter, and exposed themselves. My sister's husband withdrew entirely from advising them. My sister stopped boasting about their finances. My parents began selling items, artwork, furniture, jewelry, to cover their debt. Their carefully curated image began to crack. Neighbors whispered. Friends distanced themselves. The family pedestal they built over decades wobbled, then tilted. And I remained calm. I didn't expose them. I didn't humiliate them. I didn't seek revenge. I simply allowed the truth to do what truth always does. Unravel lies. Their downfall was not loud. It was quiet, inevitable, earned. And as their world shrank, something unexpected happened inside me. I felt lighter, freer, as if the invisible chains I'd worn since childhood had finally broken. Then my mother calls, her voice shaking, and asks if I can come over. She says, "There's something you need to know about your real father." I drove to my parents' house one last time. Not out of obligation, not out of hope, but out of a desire for closure. My mother sat at the kitchen table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The woman who once commanded every room now seemed trapped inside her own regrets. She didn't offer tea. She didn't posture. She didn't sigh with theatrical disappointment. She simply said, "I'm sorry." I waited. She continued, voice wavering. "You weren't supposed to learn the truth like this. Your biological father, he left before you were born. We told everyone you were Thomas's daughter because it was easier, cleaner." I listened in stillness. "We raised you the best we could," she said. "But I think we never forgave you for being a reminder of that mistake." There it was. The wound behind the cruelty. Not justification. Not absolution. But explanation. My father sat nearby, silent. His eyes were tired, not angry, not defensive. Just tired. "I won't expose you," I said. "Not publicly." Both of them exhaled invisible relief. "But I won't stay in this family dynamic anymore." My mother nodded. My father looked down. "You deserved more from us," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "I did." We talked for another hour. Not warmly, not deeply, but honestly. And that honesty was something we had never shared before. When I left, I felt no bitterness. No desire for further punishment. Just completion. On the drive home, I rolled down the window. The air felt different. New, sharp, full of promise. For the first time in my life, the past no longer held me by the throat. I spent the following months building something quietly beautiful. I took a writing class. I joined a hiking group of women my age. I learned to cook for pleasure instead of efficiency. I let silence be peaceful, not threatening. I created traditions for myself instead of clinging to old ones. And the alimony, the money my parents had tried to seize, went toward building a real future. A future that belonged to me. My relationship with them did not fully end. But it changed. It became distant, cautious, defined. Boundaries grew where wounds once lived. And I realized that sometimes justice is not about punishment. Sometimes it's about reclaiming space where someone once planted shame. One day, months later, Julie calls me and says, "I think I'm in trouble. I need your help." Julie's voice on the phone trembled in a way I had never heard before. She hinted at financial issues, marital tension, regrets she wasn't ready to name aloud. But I didn't rush in to save her. I didn't drop everything. I didn't sacrifice myself the way I had my entire life. I simply said, "I hope you find a solution." Kind, firm, distant. Because the lesson of all this, the truth that settled into my bones, was simple. Compassion does not require self-destruction. I spent decades believing that love meant accommodation, silence, and endless forgiveness. But real love, healthy love, doesn't demand you shrink to make others comfortable. My parents believed I owed them for raising me. My sister believed I owed her for being the daughter they preferred. My brother-in-law believed I owed the family my alimony because I wasn't successful enough. But the truth is this. A child does not owe their parents repayment for being raised. A sibling does not owe compensation for family expectations. And a woman rebuilding her life does not owe her survival to anyone. What we owe, truly owe, is integrity, honesty, boundaries, and the courage to walk away from manipulation disguised as love. I did not seek revenge. I sought clarity. And clarity dismantled the entire structure they built around me. In the end, my parents faced the consequences of their choices. My sister confronted the emptiness of hers. And I stepped, finally, into my own life. One built not on guilt or obedience, but on truth. One where love flows freely, without invoices. Without signatures forged in quiet rooms. Without conditional acceptance. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Family should be a home, not a debt. And your life, no matter who tries to claim it, belongs to you alone. And as for me, I'm still walking forward. Still rebuilding. Still discovering what it means to be whole after a lifetime of being divided. But I am no longer afraid. And that, I think, is the real redemption.